Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today we are doing my September book haul. So I kind of slipped in the month of September. I've been doing fairly well with just pre-ordering books and not buying a lot of books, but I slipped. It happens. I also slipped in October, so you'll get to see that in a month. But it's just been, yeah, I bought a lot of stuff. I'm gonna own it. I'm gonna own it. And I am very excited for everything that I got. I haven't read any of it yet, which is great, but I have some good stuff here to show you. I also have some stuff from publishers. My overall book count for this month is 17 new books, and I read 11 books, so it doesn't quite balance out, but at least I'm reading through a lot of stuff. This is the excuse that I make for myself every single month, and I'm just gonna keep rolling with it because it makes me feel better. I'm kind of owning the fact that my TBR is just never ending and always gonna grow. I'm gonna try to read it down as much as possible. I very much accept the fact that that's probably not gonna happen. I will probably have a new mindset on this next month, but it's all good. It's fine. So I think what I'm going to do is, as per usual, I'm going to do books that I got from publishers and books that I got on my own. I have a significantly smaller stack, but still a decent sized stack from publishers this month, so let's go ahead and start with that. So first things first is one that I'm very excited about, and I'm hoping I can get to it really soon. This is the first book in a new trilogy from a sort of celebrated fantasy author. I've not read his other series, but I've heard excellent, excellent things. This is A Time of Dread by John Gwynne. So you may have heard John Gwynne's name before because he wrote a series of books. I believe they are The Faithful and the Fallen. I don't think this is The Faithful and the Fallen, but the first one is called Malice. You might recognize it. It's kind of a really nice, simplistic cover. I've been wanting to read it for a long time. Turns out I have it on my Kindle. I had no idea, so hopefully I will be able to read that when I finish this, because I'd like to start this new series first. So this series is called Of Blood and Bone, and this is published by Pan here in the UK, and it is sort of classic fantasy. It feels like kind of epic fantasy. This is about a race of warrior angels once defeated a mighty demon horde. Now the victorious Bel-Elim rule the banished lands. However, peace is brutally enforced. Sounds very much like a sort of the protectors become the predators type book. So this book is about a hot-headed character named Riv. He's desperate to join the sort of Bel-Elim's peacekeeping force, the sort of angel rulers peacekeeping force, and she discovers betrayal in the ranks and a life-changing secret. This sounds really, really fun. I'm gonna read it anyway because I've heard great things about his books. I have wanted to read him for a long time. He's just one of those authors who's been on my list for years, and I am hoping to get to this really soon. I have very high hopes for this one, but I don't really know what to expect. Next up is a very interesting one. So I've actually tried to read a book by this author before in a different genre, and it just didn't really work for me. I don't know if it's a me problem or a him problem, but I have his latest. This is Rejoice by Steven Erikson. This is his, I think it might be his first take on sci-fi. He's like a really popular fantasy author. He wrote this series called Malazan, Book of the Fallen, which is like your classic, like, 800-page fantasy novels. I think there's 10 of them. I tried to read Gardens of the Moon, which is the first one, and I just didn't get on with it, which a lot of people do. It's one of those series that you either like love or you just can't get into. And so I'm very curious to try his sci-fi because this sounds really, really interesting. It sounds like something that I might really enjoy, so this will be a really interesting one to read. So this is about an alien AI that has been sent to our solar system as a representative of 3 advanced species, and its mission is to save Earth's ecosystem, but of course humanity has been destroying Earth's ecosystem for years. So the AI has to make a choice because humanity is part of, again, this ecosystem. Is it going to destroy humanity or is it going to save it? I love the concept of this book. I'm a little bit nervous because I don't necessarily get on with his writing, but this should be a really, really interesting one. This is published by Gollancz, and this is coming out in October, I believe on the 18th of October here in the UK. Next up, we have a couple of my most highly anticipated books for the following year. So these both come out in January of 2019. This first one is very exciting, and I cannot wait to read it. I'm kind of like, in this haul, you'll see I'm starting to build up a little stack of books for my winter TBR, and they'll be pretty obvious when you see them. This first one, guys, I'm so excited, is Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. This is, of course, the concluding book in the Winternight trilogy, which starts with The Bear and the Nightingale, goes on to The Girl in the Tower. I'm so excited to read this. I really can't wait to read this. And as I have said with The Bear and the Nightingale, and as I have said with The Girl in the Tower, these books are perfect to be read on chilly winter nights, preferably when it's snowing, bundled up under some blankets, and just sort of, you get swept away by her beautiful atmospheric writing. I just love these so much. So I have this now. It comes out in the UK on the 10th of January 2019. I'm going to read it soon, probably not quite yet because it's not chilly and wintry enough for me yet. The next very exciting January release that I have is one that I am so excited about. It just sounds so perfect and fantastic for me. This is like my exact kind of book. This is called The Girl King, and this is by Mimi Yu. This one is from Gollancz as well, and this comes out in January of 2019. Also on the 10th of January 2019, so that's going to be a great day for releases. But this is a young adult fantasy that is sort of in an East Asian setting. So this follows two girls named Lu and Min, and they are sort of the children of the emperor, and they have always sort of grown up knowing that Lu is destined to become the first female empress of this empire. However, her father betrays the two of them and names their male cousin as his heir, and their lives sort of split off in two different directions in order to sort of regain what they have lost. So Lu goes off and she is sort of figuring out what she's going to do to reclaim her throne, and Min discovers that she has this sort of power, but she's still very much in the shadows of the court. And I think that this is just going to be great. This is not one that I feel is necessarily like a seasonal read, so I am probably going to get to this very soon. Hopefully in the month of October, maybe in November though, we'll see. The last two books were not actually sent to me. I received them at an event. I went to Hotkey Books at the end of the month, and we had like a blogger brunch type thing. They fed us lots of donuts, and we had two authors come in to talk about their books, and it was a really fantastic time. I've actually not read either of these authors' books before, so this is very exciting. I have To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo, and I have Soulbinder by Sebastian de Castell. So these two books are ones that are by authors I've wanted to read for a long time, and I've just never gotten around to it. I swear to God, the number of times that I have almost bought To Kill a Kingdom is ridiculous, and I've just never managed to do it until now, but I am very, very interested, particularly in this one, because it is a sort of dark retelling of The Little Mermaid. This sounds great. This sounds super fun. I think it's been pretty successful so far. I've seen lots of people reading it, and it's just time I get around to it. So the reason that I didn't say that I was particularly excited to read this one is because this is the fourth in a series, and I don't have the first one. I do now because I've actually gone out and bought it. That will be in my October book haul, but I've got a while to go. I'm not going to get to this anytime soon because I have 3 other books in his series to read. This sounds really fun. It sounds like a really cool world, and I'm intrigued. I don't know anything about it because I don't want to look at the inside flap because it's the 4th one, and that sounds like just a bad idea. Alright, that is it for books from publishers. So now I have a great big stack of books that I bought myself. So they're either things that I bought in the bookshop, I pre-ordered for myself, and a lot of pre-orders came in September, by the way, and I also have my Fairy Loot book for this month, so let's get into it. Because it's at the top of the stack, I'm going to do my Fairy Loot book first. This is Mirage by Sumia Daud. So this is the sort of variant cover. I can show you what the UK cover looks like. The US one is purple, the UK one it looks like this. So these are quite nice. Here, you can kind of see it's sprayed edges. This is signed in purple, which is very cute. I really like this. I love this one. I like this a lot. I think that of the two I probably prefer this, but I love the sprayed edges so much, and I am very, very excited to have an excuse to read Mirage a little bit sooner. So what I'm trying to do is read my Fairy Loot books in the month that they arrive, basically before the next one comes, because if I continue to not read my Fairy Loot books, I have to cancel my Fairy Loot subscription, which is not something that I want to do, but I need to actually read the books that come in. because obviously that makes a lot of sense. So last month I read These Rebel Waves by Sarah Rach, which I talk about in my previous video, my September wrap-up, and so I'm going to hopefully read this by the time the next Fairy Loot box comes in, so we'll see. What I know about this book is that it combines sci-fi and fantasy, which I find very, very exciting because you don't see that happen very often, and it follows a girl named Amani, and she is a girl who is living on this sort of planet that has been conquered by this great empire, and her people are very beaten down. The empire is, let's say, not loved, and she is one day sort of swept up. She's forced to become the body double for the sort of princess who's going to become the empress, who is a much hated person, including by Amani. It sounds really interesting. It's one that I would just like to kind of go in as blind as possible and just sort of read it, enjoy it. It sounds like one I'm gonna love. I have heard friends really like it in the past, but I've not heard a lot of review coverage for this one. So this is going to be a really exciting book for me to read. Hopefully I will get to it this month, and hopefully I will get to it before the next Fairy Loot box comes. So I'm going to separate out all of my pre-orders, and then I'm going to talk about the ones that I actually bought. So this first one is a middle grade book, and it looks wonderful. It's a debut novel. It looks like it combines everything that I love in children's books. This is called Pages & Co., and this is by Anna James. So this is, first of all, adorable, and also, check this out, hold on, if I can get there, like, they obviously put a lot of work, into this one, and it just, this looks like the kind of book that you could really sort of treasure, if that makes any sense. It looks so wonderful and beautiful, and something about this just invokes so much like childhood love. So this book is about a girl named Matilda, or Tilly, and she lives sort of in a bookshop with her grandparents in London, and it's called Pages & Co. And so in Pages & Co. she sort of lives her life. She's I think she's maybe like 11 or so, and she sort of lives this average life of an average girl until one day she discovers that she can step into her favorite books. She is a book wanderer. So she teams up with Alice of Alice in Wonderland and Anne of Anne of Green Gables, and she goes on these great adventures, and she's going to find out what happened to her mother, who has disappeared in the past, and maybe this book wandering will be part of that. And like, who hasn't wanted to step into their favorite book? Except for maybe like fantasy books. We don't want to step into fantasy books. Who hasn't wanted to step into their favorite childhood classic? Much safer, I think. I used to daydream about this all the time. I used to want to be able to wander around with my, you know, best friends who are characters in these books, and this sounds like the exact kind of book that little Justine would have loved, and I think that grown-up Justine is going to love it as well. Anna James is a debut author, and she lives in London, and I have seen her do lots of book events and whatnot, and she seems like a lovely person, so I'm very excited to read this and shout this out a little bit more. Another pre-order that I have is a very hard left turn, I think, from middle grade fiction. This is a contemporary novel, which is not something that I usually enjoy, but this does sound like something that's going to push the exact right buttons for me. This is Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is one that people are going absolutely mad for. Apparently the audiobook is amazing if you're an audiobook person, but I ended up buying the physical copy, and I'm very excited about this. So this is about a girl named Sadie, as I'm sure you can imagine. She has been living in the small town in Colorado, raising her little sister Maddie, and Maddie is murdered. This happens before the book starts. And there's a sort of botched police investigation. Her killer is still out there, and Sadie decides that she is going to hunt down Maddie's killer. The other side of the story is that a radio DJ, has a ridiculous name, and Wes McCrae is a radio DJ, and he finds out about Sadie's story, and he creates a true crime podcast, which I love so much. And he sort of becomes obsessed with Maddie's story, and he's going to, you know, sort of track down what's happening and follow Sadie's journey as she is sort of out in the world trying to seek justice. This sounds great. This is going to be grim. This is going to be dark, and I'm really, really excited for it. I'm 100% here for this. Again, it sounds like it ticks all the right boxes for me. It's not particularly long, so I'm hoping to get to it soon. I don't know how this caught my attention. I think I heard about it on someone's blog, and ever since then I'm seeing it everywhere. It's not a book that I normally would have thought to have picked up, but I'm really glad that I heard about this. I think that this is going to be really, really good. My next two pre-orders are those books that are going to be added to the winter TBR pile. Again, it's going to be pretty obvious. I have The Way Past Winter by Kieran Millwood Hargrave, and I have Sisters of the Winter Wood by Raina Rosner. These both sound really, really fantastic. I am particularly excited for The Way Past Winter because I love her book so much. This is another middle grade book from Kieran Millwood Hargrave. She wrote a book called The Girl of Ink and Stars, which I absolutely adored. I just loved so much, and she wrote a book called The Island at the End of Everything, which I haven't read. Just classic me. And this is about a girl named Mila. All of the boys in her village disappear, and she has to go on an adventure to try to find them. This sounds like one that's going to become like a children's classic. I'm pretty sure this is a children's book. The next one that I have is Sisters of the Winter Wood, which sounds really, really intriguing. It feels like it's got kind of Baron the Nightingale type vibes, which I really like. It takes place in the Ukraine, and I believe, I might be completely off base with this, but I believe that this one sort of is loosely inspired by Goblin Market, which is a poem by Christina Rossetti. I don't know, there's something about both of these that really make me feel like they're going to be perfect for cold, cold, cold winter nights. They're just going to kind of sweep you away. Next up, I have three books that are actually new for me, but I have already read, so they're not going on my TBR, so I will just rattle through them really quickly. The first being, I finally got a copy of The Martian. It's been a very, very long time. I read this on Kindle. I talk about this book all the time. I needed to buy a copy of it, and I spotted it in a charity shop for £2.50, so I picked it up. If you like the film, if you haven't read this yet, pick this up, seriously, it's so fun. I also ended up picking up a copy of The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. Again, a book that I read, but I read it many, many, many years ago, and I'm not sure I appreciated it as much as I would now. I liked it, I thought it was fine. I'm not in love with it like the way so many other people are. I would like to reread it. I think I read this in high school. This has been a while. But his new book, Bridge of Clay, just came out, and I have really no interest in reading it. It doesn't really sound like my kind of thing, but it has inspired me to want to go back and reread The Book Thief. So this might happen at some point when I have a chance. We'll see when that is. The last book that I got, which is not going on to my TBR, is Black Wolves by Kate Elliott. I loved this book so much when I read it in 2016, I think. And it's an interesting one. It would be really interesting to go back and read it now, knowing what I know about Own Voices books and sort of authors being able to tell their stories, because Kate Elliott is a white author, and this is obviously an East Asian inspired book, but it is fantastic. It has great world building, it has older characters, which I really appreciate, and it's just good fun. It's a long one, and I don't know what's up with the second one. I bought this because I thought the second one had a due date of September 2018, but it looks like it's not due out anytime soon. So when there is a solid date announced for the second book, I might go back and reread this, and that'll be a really interesting experience. Right, so I only have 3 more left, and I will rattle through these pretty quick. The first being the book that I was going to read for my book club. I read about 20 pages, and I can see it being a really divisive one, in that no one in my book club liked it, I'm pretty sure, but it's really, really highly acclaimed, and some people seem to really love it. This is The Vagrant by Peter Newman. So if you saw my wrap-up video, you may have noticed that Emma Newman was an author that I read. Peter Newman is her husband, and this is a kind of, I don't know, it's like a sci-fi, horror, steampunk, grim mashup type thing. It's an interesting read. There's like nothing on the back cover, which I appreciate. It doesn't tell you anything about the book. So I don't really know what to say here, but I will say that from what I've read, it looks like, first things first, a completely hopeless and bleak world, which I love, but it's told in a very strange way, in that the main character does not speak throughout the entire book. We do not see the world through his point of view. It's a third-person kind of narrator. I know a lot about this book. This is the problem. I know a lot about this book now because I went to my book club and it wasn't a big hit, and people talked about it, and I feel like I know a lot about it now, and I don't want to say any of those things because they're not my opinions because I haven't read this yet, and I'm probably not going to read it anytime soon. It just seems like a really strange book that'll either work for you or really won't. So if you are kind of intrigued by this, I would love to hear if you're interested in reading it, or if you have read it. I would love to hear what you think about it because it just seems like a really strange one. I will probably read it at some point, but it is going to be low on my TBR. Next, I have two kind of spooky books. So I have Price Guide to the Occult by Leslye Walton, and I have The Corset by Laura Purcell. So really quick, to rattle through The Corset first, this is a sort of Victorian Gothic novel by the author of The Silent Companions, which I read last year and loved so much. It's so good, and it's really scary and spooky and creepy and awful and wonderful, and I loved it so much. Very high hopes for The Corset, which is about, I believe, a woman who has been incarcerated in a Victorian prison, which sounds like a terrible place, and the sort of other woman who has taken on sort of charity work talking to these female prisoners, and we have to decide if the woman who has been incarcerated is mad or a murderer, if this is intentional, what's going on. There's going to be this great mystery here. All of her books, well, all two of her books are very kind of spooky and supernatural, and I'm so excited for this. The Silent Companion, seriously, is amazing and so good, and I can so highly recommend it. Cannot wait to read The Corset. I'm hoping to read it this month because it is October, of course. And then we have Price Guide to the Occult. So she wrote a book called The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender, which is a long title that I always forget, which so many people absolutely love. People have loved this one a little bit less, but I feel like I'm more interested in this book than her previous one. So this is about a girl who wants to live kind of just a normal teenage life, an unremarkable life, but she is the descendant of a witch that famously cursed her family a century ago, and she is hoping to lift this curse by getting her hands on this mysterious book that promises to cast any spell for the right price. Naturally, this is going to be a disaster, I'm sure, but this looks really good. I love this cover. This is the UK cover, which is infinitely better than the US one, by the way. And I don't know, I'm really excited for this. This sounds great. It sounds witchy. I don't read enough witchy books. I don't think I've ever really read a witchy book other than Roald Dahl. So I have a fair few. This is the one that's really on the top of my TBR. Another one that I want to read in October, and I think that this is going to be a really fun one. So that is it. That is it for my book haul for the month of September. So I would love to hear what you guys think. If you have any of these books, if you read any of these books, if you have a place that you would recommend for me to start, or if you just got any really cool books in September that you want to shout about, definitely leave a comment below. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.